The next sensitive period is the sensitive period for order. It is most important for the development of intelligence. Through the creation of order in all the impressions the child receives, he develops a framework for understanding his world. The sensitive period assists the child in structuring and organizing all that he takes in. For example, through his evening routines of bathing, feeding, and sleeping, the child learns to anticipate the different parts of the ritual and to prepare himself for sleep. He needs to categorize and classify the impressions in order to make understanding possible. It is much easier to connect new knowledge to old knowledge than receiving seemingly unconnected and new pieces of information all the time. The child-sensitive period for order starts about 6 months when he has become accustomed to living in our world, and it wanes around 4 years, reaching its peak around 2, when the child is particularly vulnerable to changes in his life. We must understand that the child's sensitivity towards order has different significance than for the adult. The adult uses order as a way of maintaining life, such as tidying up or organizing in one way or another. For an adult, order has an external purpose and a specific goal. For the child, order is a way of organizing the development of intelligence. It is a way of structuring his understanding of the world and thereby understanding himself. The motive is intrinsic and of a constructive nature. It is the inner order that is created in and by the child. Although it movement and order. As an example, we can tell that when we do practical life exercises, we often put things in a sequence and follow an order of activities that bring logic to any activity. In the sensorial materials, we establish order out of chaos. For example, when we find 2 color tablets that are the same out of a scattered group of tablets with many other colors. In language, we find order in the way we write every letter and how we arrange words when doing function of words or reading analysis. When doing these exercises, we will mix up the order of a sentence, for example, showing phrases like the horse black instead of the black horse. And then the child will bring order to the phrase again. The area of math is in its nature or the ordering of numbers and quantities. The coordination of movement that the child experiences when doing purposeful work or when walking on the line is also a way of bringing order to the different limbs of the body. The next sensitive period is for the refinement of movement. Movement is an essential part of life. Without movement, there is no life, and vice versa. When we talk about movement, we are focusing on the upper and lower limbs of human, on the development of hands and legs. The acquisition of movement starts in utero and happens mainly in the course of the child's first year. During this year, the child will develop from a helpless being not able to lift or control his head to being able to sit, walk, stand, and use his hands. Once the child manages to stand and walk, he possesses the basic movements characteristics for humans. Once these basic movements have been acquired, the sensitive period now urges the child to a refinement of those movements. First and foremost, he has to master balance and equilibrium. During the first year, the child learns to walk, but later he will learn how to skip, hop, run, balance, etc. He will also develop the movements of his hand, which in turn are essential to intellectual development. It is the hands that bring information about the world to the mind. We can sense with our feet and other body parts, but naturally it is the hands that have the ability to explore, manipulate, and create. When the baby touches, the impression is transmitted to the mind through the hands. Later on, when the child has an idea of, for example, building the pink tower, the hands will be the executive organ to get that done. Much emphasis is therefore placed on the education of the hand. The sensitive period helped the child develop willed and coordinated movements directed by the intellect. Influenced by the human tendencies, the child has a desire to do exact movements over and over again in order to refine them. We support this sensitive period by creating an environment where both gross and fine motor movements can develop by means of purposeful work. In order to develop balance and equilibrium, we offer walking on the line specifically, but also many other presentations include walking back and forth, carrying, and fetching. When the child, for example, has chosen to build the pink tower, he has to walk from the place where the tower is kept to his mat back and forth 10 times in order to carry over each single cube. With the help of practical life presentations, we help the child to become more aware of his movements in the room, and we place great emphasis on how to carry and hold while we are walking. Besides these activities, we also offer opportunity for movements of various kinds outdoors, such as skipping, running, bicycling, skipping, hopping, etc. All exercises and activities in the Montessori environment give opportunities for development of the hand. There is carrying, holding, moving, touching, feeling, and manipulating in everything we do. With the practical life exercises, we help the child refine his movements of his hand when he is pouring, folding, or polishing. The sensory materials give the child the means to explore and understand the world, and he will use his hands to do so by feeling the roughness of the touch tablets, sorting color tablets or sound boxes into pairs, and by tracing the outline of geometry and leaf shapes. In the language area, he will add another set of fine motor movements to the repertoire of his hands, writing. And in math, it all comes together, touching, sorting, and writing, combined with a need for exactness and precision. Every presentation we give includes movement, even reading when the child is invited to act out and move around in order to label the environment. Movement keeps the child's interest alive during a longer presentation because he is sensitive to it. The next sensitive period is the sensitive period for refinement of the senses. The senses develop to a certain degree already in the womb, where the child can, for example, perceive sound. But the main development takes place after birth through the child's interaction with his worlds. Once the senses are properly developed, the refinement of them takes place mainly between the ages of 2 and 4. In this period, the child is urged to seek out sensory impressions. Through sensorial impressions, the child becomes aware of the physical properties of the world, and he builds up a storage of knowledge. At first, the child reacts to visual impulses and uses the movement of the eyes and head to perceive more. Soon he will be exploring by touch, bringing everything to his mouth. With increasing control of movement, the child will be able to manipulate what he is grasping. This will give him new sensorial impressions. For the child, it is impossible not to touch, to taste, and to manipulate, for thus is the power of this sensitive period. Refining the senses help the child to classify and organize impressions because he will be increasingly able to distinguish between finer and finer differences. This also leads to greater awareness of the senses, helping the child to distinguish what is relevant and what is not when receiving sense impressions. We support the sensitive period by creating an environment where the child can explore freely. In addition, the sensorial materials are specially designed to serve the refinement of the senses. Here, the child will experience sensorial impressions in an organized way because the material isolates one quality at a time. When he works with the touch boards, for example, there is nothing in the material that distracts from the sense of touch. No color, no intricate design. The focus is solely on the rough and smooth surfaces. Other materials will help him to distinguish the subtle differences of size, color, and sound. Because of the sensitive period for refinement of the senses, most of the initial presentations in sensorial are given before the age of 4. Later, we offer further exploration of the materials by adding language and by doing exercise and games with the 4-5-year-olds. The last sensitive period is the sensitive period for social behavior. There is a period in the child's life between 2.5 and 5 when he is especially sensitive for impulses of social behavior. It emerges with the development of language, when the child consciously comes into contact with others and starts using language as a tool for communication. Before this age, he was happy with playing side by side and doing the same as the other children. But now he wants to interact, and therefore has a greater need to internalize the rules of social behavior. This sensitive period could also be seen as part of the sensitive periods for language or order. It is the language that connects the child with the other children, and it is his sensitivity for order that helps him to figure out the social norms and rules of this group. This sensitive period aids the child in his process of belonging. By adapting to the social sphere of his people, the child becomes one of them. At this point in life, the child is still in a socially embryonic stage. He will absorb the rules and the norms, but will not come to full bloom before he reaches the next stage of development, the age from 6 to 12. There will be a lot of trial and error in connection to social behavior during the years in the Children's House, and we have to be patient guides for this difficult accomplishment on behalf of the child. We support the child's sensitive period for social behavior by establishing clear and simple rules for our environment. In order to act correctly, the child needs to know in detail how to behave when in a group. This we will practice through exercises of grace and courtesy.